Hey everyone, welcome to the complete backend development course here at Algozenith. So let's actually start by thinking about the apps we use every day, whether it's ordering food, whether it's booking tickets, or just chatting with the friends. Now, have you ever wondered what's happening behind the scenes? How your request gets processed, how your data is stored, and how this data comes back to you in seconds whenever we need it, right? That's exactly what backend dev is all about. And these are the things that we are going to learn in this course. Now, before we actually start, there's a quick heads up. Since we'll be working with JavaScript throughout the course, you guys should already be comfortable with the basics. Now, things like variables, things like functions, callbacks, promises, async await. If you have got a solid handle on these concepts, you are going to do great in this course. All right. Now, let's talk about what all things we'll be covering in this entire backend dev course. So we'll kick things off with Node.js, of course, which is a technology that took JavaScript out of the browser and put it on the server. Then from there, we'll move into Express.js to build web apps. And we'll also bring in TypeScript so our projects are cleaner and easier to scale. Then we'll learn how to build APIs, both REST and GraphQL. We'll also explore databases, relational ones like MySQL or Postgres, and non-relational ones like MongoDB. So you'll know which to use when. All right. So along the way, we'll cover important topics like authentication. We'll be talking about authorization as well. We'll look into performance optimization and even real-time features with the WebSockets, right? And once you're comfortable building apps locally, we'll take things further with cloud deployment. We'll talk about system design basics, and we'll talk about some DevOps practices like CI/CD pipelines, right? So by the end of this course, you will not just know the theory, you'll actually be able to build and deploy production-ready backend systems on your own. All right, so I hope you are excited. So let's get started. And our first stop is going to be the foundation of everything, which is the Node.js itself. All right, what is this Node.js? Now, before we actually start talking about Node.js, there's this question we need to answer, which is how do we run JavaScript? If I ask you, hey, take this piece of JavaScript code and execute it, where are you actually going to run this piece of JavaScript code? Now, as JavaScript developers, we know we can take a piece of JavaScript code and we can actually execute it in the browser. So we have this function here. It takes in two numbers and its job is to return the sum of those two numbers. So if I pass in 5 and 10, it should return 15. So if I execute it, it's returning 15 as expected. Great. So I am able to actually take this piece of JavaScript and execute it in the browser. But the question is, what is inside of the browser that actually allows me to execute JavaScript code? So the answer is JavaScript engine. So all the browsers that we use for web browsing have something in common. All of them contain this JavaScript engine right here. So it's a piece of software that actually takes your JavaScript and executes it. Now, Chrome web browser has a JavaScript engine which goes by the name V8 engine. And Mozilla Firefox has a JavaScript engine which goes by the name SpiderMonkey. Now, Apple's Safari, this browser has a JavaScript engine which goes by the name JavaScript Core. So basically, all the browsers have JavaScript engine, and it's that JavaScript engine which is responsible for executing JavaScript code. Now, the question is, can I run this piece of JavaScript code outside of the browser? Is there any place I can execute JavaScript code other than the browser? Now, before Node.js, the answer to this question was no. There's no piece of software that will allow me to execute JavaScript outside of the browser. All right. So, but Node.js is a piece of software that actually allows us to run JavaScript outside of the browser. So if I go to my terminal and let's say I write a piece of code here. So this GCD is a function that actually allows me to calculate the HCF, highest common factor of two given numbers, right? So let's say I want to calculate the GCD of these two things. So how can I do it? Well, I'll type node. Once I type node, I enter into something called REPL, which is actually short for read, evaluate, print, and loop. All right. Now let me paste this piece of code here. And if I try to console log, let's say I want the GCD of two numbers. Let's take two random numbers. Let's say 14 and 18. What is the HCF of these two numbers? It's saying 6. So basically, I was able to execute this piece of JavaScript outside of the browser. And what made this possible? This Node software right here. So Node.js is a piece of software that allows us to execute JavaScript outside of the browser. Great. Now, before moving forward, let's talk about two things, JavaScript engine and JavaScript runtime. What's the difference between these two things? So JavaScript engine, we already know every browser contains a JavaScript engine. In Chrome, it's called V8 engine. In Mozilla Firefox, it's called SpiderMonkey, so on and so, right? But what is this JavaScript runtime? So JavaScript runtime will comprise of two things. Every JavaScript runtime is actually going to have a JavaScript engine inside of it, also a bunch of APIs. Now, APIs can be of two different things, of two different types. If we talk about web APIs, as JavaScript developers, we know what a fetch API is. So fetch API is actually given to us by the browser, which we use to make network calls. Now, there's something called set timeout, set interval, even the console.log that we use. That's not part of the core JavaScript. It's actually the API provided by the browser. All right, so that's what comes under the web API. But what about Node.js APIs? No, Node.js APIs have actually different modules, such as FS, file system module. It has an HTTP module, it has a process module, among many other great things. All right, so JavaScript runtime is always going to have a JavaScript engine, also a bunch of APIs. Now, these APIs can be web APIs, or these can be the Node.js APIs. All right, now we know the difference between the JavaScript engine and also what a JavaScript runtime is. Now, how was Node.js actually born? So there is this person called Ryan Dahl. What he did was he took the Chrome's V8 engine. Now, Chrome's V8 engine is actually an open source software, meaning it's free to use. You can go, you can look into the code, you can contribute to the code, right? Contribute to the project. That's what an open source software is. So he took this Chrome's V8 engine, and he also took a library which goes by the name libuv. So libuv is a library that actually allows us to do async IO. Now, you don't need to understand these things as of now. We'll be diving deeper into these things in the future videos. So what Ryan did was he took Google's V8 engine, and he also added libuv for event loop and async IO. And what he did was he wrapped these two things in a runtime so that developers could use JavaScript outside of the browser. And he did all of this in 2009. That's actually when Node.js was born. You can actually go onto YouTube and you can see the presentation given by the person himself. And this is when he introduced Node.js to the world. All right. Now that we know what a JavaScript engine is, now that we know what a JavaScript runtime is, let's actually go to the Node.js docs itself and see how they define Node.js. Now, they say that Node.js is free, meaning we don't have to pay if you want to use Node.js, which is great. It's an open source software, meaning you can go to GitHub and you can see the entire code, right? You can look into the code, you can go into the issues, you can raise PRs, basically contribute to this particular project. Now you can see, since this is an open source software, there are some 3,500 odd people who have actually contributed to this particular project. That's the great thing about open source softwares, right? All right. It's also cross-platform. Cross-platform means it doesn't matter if you're on Windows, if you're on Mac OS, if you're on Linux, you can actually run Node.js on all the platforms. So Node.js is platform independent, right? Now, it's a JavaScript runtime environment. Now we know what that means. JavaScript runtime environment means this thing is actually going to have a JavaScript engine, also a bunch of APIs, right? Now, in case of web APIs, we know there are going to be APIs such as fetch, such as set timeout, set interval, etc. And in case of Node.js, there are going to be things like FS module, HTTP module, process module, among many other great things. All right. And this is a piece of software that actually lets developers create servers. We can create web apps using Node.js. We can create command line tools. We can create scripts. Wonderful. Now, are there any big companies that use Node.js? The answer is yes. There are millions of apps currently deployed which are built using Node.js. And there are companies such as Netflix, companies such as Uber, PayPal, which use Node.js in production. Now, there is LinkedIn, which actually uses Node.js for their mobile backend. There is this Medium, which is actually a blogging platform. They're also using Node.js, right? So basically, Node.js is used by many big companies. All right, so I hope now we understand what Node.js is, how Node.js was actually created, how it came into the picture. I hope all of that is clear. And that's all I have got for you today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.